Good evening and hello Between the Chapters Book Club. Admin LJ here once again with another really exciting live chat. I think you all know by now that I love hosting these live conversations with our authors, and I'm really excited about this evening's chat. We are going to be joined by 4 phenomenal best-selling authors. We will have Lisa Jackson, Nancy Bush, Shanora Williams, and Charlie Donlea joining us here live for the next hour. As always, during our chats and conversations, be sure to join us down in the comment section below, where I will be hanging out with everyone throughout the hour, responding, talking with you guys. And if you have questions for our authors, I will do my best to get as many of your questions into our conversation throughout our chat and our time together. As well as, I think everyone in our club knows, if you leave a question in that comment section for us before the end of our hour, so that's before 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you will be entered to win a flash giveaway, maybe 2 or 3. Who knows? You never know. We might throw in some extra ones for everyone. So if you want to be entered to win those flash giveaways for a mystery or thriller novel, make sure you leave a question for our authors during this conversation. Now, I hope everyone will join me in the comment section and say a big welcome to our 4 amazing authors as I bring them on screen with me. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our book club this evening. I think I speak for the entire club when I say we're really excited to chat with you guys, and we've all been really looking forward to this one.
Hey. Hi, thanks for having us.
So I briefly introduced you guys during my very fast talking intro, but I think it would be better to let the readers hear about you and your newest release, straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So we'll just go in order that we're on screen right now, and I will let Lisa, you will kick us off. Just tell our readers a little bit about you and your newest book.
Well, I just hosted a family reunion, so I'm a little bit rummy. At least that's my excuse today.
That's okay.
The newest book is The Third Grave, which is out now in hardback. And it is actually the 4th book of the Savannah series. They're individual books that can be read as standalones, but they are connected with the heroine, Nikki Gillette, who is a reporter and kind of pushy, and the hero, who is now her husband, Detective Pierce Reed. The story, again, is set in Savannah, and it kind of came to me, I don't know what I heard, but I heard something about an empty grave, and I thought, well, what about if I wrote a story and there were obviously marked graves and one was vacant? Mm-hmm. So I started noodling about it and came up with the Third Grave, which is the story of a missing daughter. 3 girls go missing, and however many years after the fact, when the case is not solved, they are discovered in an old Savannah mansion after a hurricane. I think the story's a lot of fun. I have the murder mystery on one hand, and then the 2 characters who got together in one of the previous books and are now married have the issue of she wants to get pregnant, and they're having trouble conceiving a child. So besides the exterior problems of the case that the detective husband, Pierce Reed, does not want his pushy wife to investigate, and her not being able to stop herself, they also have this other internal conflict about becoming parents and trying to become parents, and it isn't as easy as they thought. So I think it's a pretty fun book. I have some surprises in it, and I really enjoyed writing it. So I hope you like it.
It sounds good to me.
Yes, as I say, gotta love double conflict and all of that.
I like the mansion thing, the graves and all of that.
Yes.
So my book is The Gossip, and it is the second book of it's turning into a trilogy. Who knows if it's more than that. I'm writing The Neighborhood now, which is the follow-up to it. But it is the follow-up to The Babysitter, which came out last year. And The Gossip is really kind of an overview of different people inside this story and how over the years gossip has affected them. And one particular person who's carried a grudge for forever and never gotten over what happened to him in grade school from some mean girls. And it's kind of like he's getting his revenge while other people are also dealing with how gossip has affected them. And one of the main characters who came from The Babysitter into The Gossip, she's been injured and has had a handicap ever since. She's unable to, her thought process is a little different than everybody else's, but she's also very much a truth teller. So she actually kind of leads some of the story and gets with the hero and heroine in the end and helps out. And I don't know, people love her. Her name is Emma.
Sounds good.
Shanora, why don't you go next?
Oh, okay. Yes, my book is actually a debut thriller, so I'm not a veteran like y'all, unfortunately.
That's great, though.
Yeah, so it's my first book, my first thriller, and it's about a girl named Ivy Hill who is seeking revenge on this rich, wealthy woman named Lola, and she's seeking revenge because of a childhood, I would say, sabotage that happened to her when she was younger, and she never got answers for it. So when she finds out the name of this woman, she realized she's rich and living this, like, you know, the Instagram worthy life and everything. And so she wants what she has. And that includes her husband. And, you know, it's just a lot of crazy dramatics. But she doesn't realize that there's someone behind the reason she found out that name who is exacting their own revenge. So that's all I'll say to not spoil it. Oh, she's muted.
All right, let's see how many times I do that during this hour. Charlie, why don't you go next?
So, despite that the suicide house is right behind your head, Lauren, my newest book is actually The Girl Who's Taken, the re-release of The Girl Who's Taken. So I'm going to give a quick synopsis of that. But The Girl Who's Taken is the story of two abducted girls, one who shows back up and one who stays missing. Megan McDonald and Nicole Cuddy are high school seniors when they're abducted from a beach party. 2 weeks after the abduction, Megan miraculously reappears, having escaped from a bunker where she was held captive in the woods. Nicole is never seen again. A year later, Megan writes a best-selling memoir about her time in captivity and about her escape. And as the book climbs the bestsellers list, Megan becomes a media darling. Nicole, the girl who's still missing, has an older sister named Livia, who's a forensic pathologist. And Livia's never given up hope that she's going to find Nicole alive. And when a body shows up in Livia's morgue, it offers the first clue as to what might have happened to Livia. The body also tips Livia off that everything in Megan McDonald's memoir is a lie. And so the story is Livia's search for the truth and figure out what really happened the night the two girls were abducted. Surprise ending, an ending that I love. It's still my favorite ending of any of the books. And I hope it's one of those endings that makes you rip back through the pages to see how you missed it.
Awesome. I mean, obviously, I'm a little bit biased. I've read, if not the entirety of all four of these books, read the majority of all four of these books. I've been talking about them for many years, even though some of them have only just come out. So I'm really, I know the readers are going to be as excited about them as I am, which in listening to all of you guys talk about your releases and a little bit about your writing, Shanora's really had me wondering, a lot of mystery thrillers these days do have a very strong theme of revenge in some shape or form, whether it's an antagonist wanting revenge or it's, a protagonist trying to avenge someone. That seems to be a really strong hook for a lot of these stories these days. Why do you think we're so drawn to that type of character arc and that type of storytelling device? I'm actually going to let Shanora kick this one off, since, like I said, her description was directly about revenge stories. So what do you think it is that draws you in, either as a reader or a writer, to that kind of arc?
Oh, it's a lot of elements. Ooh. I would say, I think I don't act on revenge, but in fiction, I will definitely write it, like watch it, write it, like everything, read it. And I watch a lot of revenge shows. There's even a show called Revenge, actually. I watch a lot of that. And for I don't know what it is that draws me into it. I think it's just because it could happen to you maybe, or could happen to someone that you know based off of someone else's representation, like how they see you. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of nerve-wracking a little bit to think about, because I actually know people who've been, sought out, after years of, maybe bullying or harassment, everything like that. So I don't know what it is that draws me to it or why readers are hooked to it, but it's something about it that's like, I don't know. I guess you want to know the person's story of why they want that revenge. Like, why do they want to go after this person so badly? And then you discover it and it's like, oh, well, I can understand that. And you can sort of sympathize with it. Right. But me personally, I would never act on it. But to read it and to watch it is a different take. It's interesting.
Yes, important to say. I don't think anyone on this chat would ever act on, vengeance or
unless it involves
mode.
Babies or kids, like that's different. Right. Not my kids, then I'm coming for you. But yeah,
of course. And then Nancy, I'm going to toss it to you next, because we had a similar conversation during our one-on-one chat a couple days ago.
I just think it's psychological. I mean, there's something about somebody who can't let it go. We kind of talked about grudges and in that, and we had a talk last week. I was with Lauren, and it's kind of that. I said then what I'd heard was holding a grudge is like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to die, and I think that's kind of that sort of twisted a lot of times in the revenge, that it's like it's all their fault, it's not my fault, I've got to make this right. It's this kind of like twisted kind of psychology that the main character has, and it's kind of fascinating because it isn't like what we do. I mean, other than writing about it, it's not like your regular day, generally speaking.
Right. And then Charlie, how about you?
I think he's on mute.
Yeah, Charlie, I think you muted yourself there. Are we good?
No?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I can't hear through my earphones. So, but Nancy, okay. I love your characterization. Your characterization of what a grudge is, because I always say grudges are unhealthy. I mean, it's so unhealthy for the person that's holding them. But I don't know, maybe social media has made us nastier, and that's why people hold so many grudges. Without giving a lot away, the girl who's taken has a lot of a revenge angle in it. But I don't know why we're so drawn to it. I think it's like the morbid fascination of why we look at a car crash when we pass it. I mean, everyone sort of tries not to hold grudges, but some part of us always do. And so maybe it's easier to read about it than hold them ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good point. It is hard to not do these things and not sympathize sometimes with that kind of arc. Lisa, how about you? What do you think draws us in on this type
Well,
of
I think,
topic?
you can look at it two ways. Revenge is bad and revenge is good. I mean, revenge is Nancy's husband loves a great revenge story. And
His favorite. Always has been revenge.
what was the Charles Bronson ones where, the wife was killed and whatever, and he goes back?
Yeah. What were those?
I can't remember what they were. You guys know Charles Bronson movies back in the 70s, 80s? Anyway, I think
There were several of them.
Yeah, rooting for somebody got dirt, horrible things. And so we want to see that bad guy get it. It's like good versus evil.
It's satisfying.
I think revenge, revenge is a good thing. I think it can be. You can look at it as, it eats you up, the grudge and everything. But for the reader or the TV viewer, that satisfaction of the downtrodden guy coming through, that's a good thing.
Was one of the movies you were thinking called Death Wish?
I think so.
Okay, one of our very sophisticated and smart readers called that one out. So good for you. I do love that we have such different perspectives on that one topic. It's always interesting to see where people fall on that one. Well, speaking of our readers, I'm going to go ahead and pull one of their questions. Chelsea Walters is wondering, how long does it usually take you to write a full book? Lisa, why don't we start with you first?
Well, it depends. For me, I don't sit down and write the book. I sit down and kind of noodle over a story idea and send it if I think it's good. If it pans out a short synopsis of 70 pages or, a tiny little thing, if it pans out, then I send it into my editor, and if he approves it over the time span, then I write it. So it takes me several months to write a synopsis that works for me, beginning, middle, end. And then when I get the okay to go, it takes me another 6 to 8 months, sometimes up to a year to write, depending on the story, the length of the story, the complexity of the story, and the energy of the author, I guess. It's,
what's going on in your personal life?
yeah, that would be it.
Nancy, how about you?
Same. Lisa and I kind of write together a lot of them too.
True.
And so we'll bounce ideas with each other.
Do they know we're sisters?
I was about to say, for anyone
I was about
watching,
to say they look alike, but I thought I was
for anyone watching and tuning in that didn't know, they are sisters. They are our sisters of suspense, and we love when they work together because obviously the energy is very fun when they're around.
Well, when we were talking about what books, I actually picked up the one that we wrote together that's out on the stands now, and anyway, but we write together. We write some things. We don't always write together, but there's parts of us that seem to go into each other's books anyway. If we're stuck, we go to each other about certain things, and if it's like really, really a crush, we might actually like write some pages and say, here's what I've got. Here you go. So
right.
We do about everything there is.
Charlie, how about you? How long does it usually take you to write a book?
Same. I mean, I've written 6 of them, so it's about a year. I mean, that's what my contract is for. It's my life is, as every author's is just a constant pressure of a deadline. But
right.
I mean, if I broke it down, I would say when I sit down to try to work on a manuscript, I spend a couple of months outlining and brainstorming, maybe 3 months of that, and then 6 months of writing it, of just, getting the pages done. and then 3 months or so of editing it before I actually let people read it. You know, my first reader, my agent, my editor. You know, the first draft, which is what supposedly my agent, my editor sees, is really like the 10th draft because so many people have read it and given me feedback by then. But about a year is what I try to hold myself to.
Great. And Shanora, what are you?
Yeah, I hope y'all don't laugh, but it usually takes me about 6 to 7 months for my thrillers.
No laughing
but with
here.
kids,
Judgment free.
yeah, I'm like, it's kind of fast, but I'm a pretty quick writer. Once I have it outlined, I try to follow that one, but if not, it usually takes me on a better path, and it usually comes out much quicker and at a better pace for me. So yeah, for The Perfect Ruin, that one actually took me about 8 months because it was my first, and there was a lot to figure out as far as the twists that were involved. But yeah, I wrote my second one, and it took me about 6 months too. So yeah, it's usually my time frame. I draft pretty quickly, and then the rest is usually much, much slower after that. The revisions and the whole process after, yeah.
Right. Well, I will say, as the outside person, that is all very impressive. I can't imagine trying to write a book in a year, let alone 6 or 7 months or anything like that. So kudos for me for all of you guys. That's why you're the writers and I'm just the one on the camera.
I think we can all agree that the bittersweet part about taking a year or 8 months to write a book is when readers tell us, "Oh, I finished it in a day."
Oh yeah, definitely.
I spent a year on this book, and you spent 8 hours on it. But you know, the alternative is worse. So it's
right. It's a double-edged sword. It's both a compliment and pressure because now you've got to keep going.
Right.
Well, both Charlie and Shanora, you touched on this a little bit. So that the idea of the outline and that outlining process, and kind of going into that drafting mode. I'm wondering, as someone who really and truly would never be able to get through not spoiling a mystery if I were trying to write one, or even really knowing what I was going to do by the end. Do you know, before you ever even start writing, what the end result is going to be? Like what the mystery reveal is, or what the big aha moment is going to be? Or do you let that kind of organically create itself? Charlie, I'm going to have you start us off because you're the one that made me think of this question.
Well, so my writing idol is John Grisham, and so he came out a few years ago with these rules for writers, and one of his sort of rules is don't start the first chapter until you know how the last chapter is going to end. And that doesn't mean it's never going to change throughout the book, but what I try to do with an outline is if I try to figure out how the book's going to end, who the bad guy's going to be, how the good guy's going to figure it out. Because if I have that, even if I have nothing else, if I have that little piece of information, that's like a beacon in the night that prevents me from getting lost while I'm writing the book. So for me, it's important that I have an idea about how the book's going to end. That being said, when I turned in my outline for The Girl Who Was Taken, my editor said, "Yeah, it sounds good. Go ahead and write the story." And when I turned in the manuscript, the final manuscript, he said, I love the ending. I love the manuscript. It has nothing to do with the outline you turned in." So things change a lot. Even the best laid plans get ruined in the writing process. But I think if you have an idea, for me, about how a book's going to end, that helps me sort of for a writing goal.
Great. Shanora, how about for you?
Oh, I like to let it marinate before I do like the ending. Like I usually do have an idea of how it'll end. I'm like, ooh, like it kind of like a brain spark, like, yeah, that's it. But it's a matter of like building up to it. Like, how are we going to get there for me? And that's usually where the hard part is because, like I'm a more of a twisty writer. Like I like to include like there's a twist and there's a twist and there's a twist, like constant, like, you know, a couple of twists here and there. So it's usually a matter of how am I going to get to that ending.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I definitely like to let it sit for a while. Like once I outline, I sit and I think, and then I make notes. I keep a notebook by my nightstand and everything, just in case something else pops up, you know, that helps me. Yeah. But I'm like Charlie as far as the outline. Like I hardly ever stick to them. It's usually little pieces here and there, but you know, my editor says the same. She's like, wait, this is not what you sent me. But most of them, she's like, it's much better though. I'm like, okay, cool. That would work.
That's good.
Oh, always good to have a supportive editor when that happens.
Definitely.
Lisa, how about for you? Do you always know what that aha ending moment will be?
Well, yeah. I kind of know where I'm going. I'm pretty sure. I have to tell a bad story though.
Oh boy.
I don't know about you guys, but the pandemic, holy crap, you know, really, I thought, well, I'm just going to sit in my little house. I've got my Wi-Fi and I'm just going to write my book and it'll go fast. But, you know, there was so much stuff going on all the time. It was just impossible to concentrate. So I wrote my book and I thought, well, that's, you know, wow, that ending came pretty fast, but there it is. Okay, so I sent it in and the editor said, well, yeah, you ended it, but what about A, B, C, D, E, F? It's like I just skipped 3 chapters. I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I'm getting old, but I went through my outline. I thought, oh, yeah, they probably want to know what happened to that person or that person. But my whole process was broken. You know, like Nancy and I usually read each other's stuff and whatever. Everything was broken for me. And it's back on track, thank God. But I still had the right ending. But like she said, like Shanora said, it's kind of like the game Chutes and Ladders that I play with my grandkids. I was right there and then I went down and I went there. So anyway, I have an outline that I veer from all the time, and then I have to kind of scurry around to get back to it so that I know that A goes to B, goes to C, go to D. Otherwise, I get really, really off track. So yes, I think it's great to go off outline because you do have these Mazdas, these ideas that just a twist that you think, I've got to put that in. It's so good. But how do I scramble back to what this says so that I can get, I don't care about the middle part so much, but I really care about the ending. However, that last time I needed to pay a little more attention.
You just got a little excited to get to the moment.
And I was so proud of myself. I'm done.
All right, Nancy, how about for you? Are you the same? You know what it's going to be?
I do the same thing. I write the outline. I know what the ending's going to be. And I just start at the beginning and I write, and it does veer off, you know, I just sort of go for about 100 to 200 pages. And as I'm going along, I recognize, oh, wait, that's not going to work. And I make a note, just kind of like in all caps, fix this.
Right.
And then about 100 to 200 pages in, depending on, right now it's just 100 pages in and I'm going back. And I start over and then I clean that up and I get that to the way I want it. It may not stay that way, but at least at that point, then the second half of the book is ready to go.
Right. I like that. I would also be leaving myself a lot of notes, and
remember this.
With my luck, those notes would make it to the editor's draft, and then it would just really be bad.
That happened too.
So I'm going to pull another question from one of our readers. This one, so do you use real life experiences or people as inspiration for your writing, or do you fully build off of your imagination? And I'm going to let Nancy start this one.
They're mostly, there might be something somebody said at one time and then take that and create a character. I was thinking about the cat in the gossip. We talked about that last week. I
Yes.
have a actual, it sounds weird, but the cat it comes into the story. He's not, solving the crime. It's just like you're following the cat into the story. And it has a purpose. You start to realize there's more going on. It's into a assisted living, and the cat kind of has a tendency to curl up in a bed with someone who is going to die, or that's what they think, or who knows. Well, anyway, so the cat comes in, and that I picked up from an actual article, because there are cats like that. They're animals, but they talk about them that 2 or 3 days before someone's death, they go and curl up in bed with them, and so that people know in the place that that's the next person to die. Mm-hmm. So I kind of have that in the gossip as well. But it's those little, as Susan and I used to say, Lisa, gimmicks kind of thing. But I know I'll never get it right.
My real name is Susan. So
Susan Lisa Jackson.
70 years and she can't get it straight.
And I try really hard, but I'm failing all the time. 40 years I've tried to do this. But anyway, so I think we do a lot of that stuff too. Mm-hmm. Lisa and I together and apart. So as far as the main characters may not be, but there may be little aspects that you've picked up from somewhere when I'm writing.
Right. Oh, I like that. I like the little nuggets of truth in real world. Charlie, how about for you? Do you ever draw from real people or places?
Well, I mean, I write thrillers. We all write thrillers, so I hope none of it's too pulled
Right.
from personal experience. But no, so it's just imagination. I mean, I start stories when I start thinking about ideas. I read headlines. I read true crime headlines. So none of what I write about is necessarily pulled from my personal experience. And I'm always really careful. I don't know about you, if everyone else here feels the same, but I'm also really careful not to use the name of anybody I know as a character, for fear that they'll be like, "What were you writing about me? Was that supposed to be how you feel about me?" So mostly it's I mean, none of it's my personal experience. The only personal experience I would say I write about is when you do research. The girl who was taken, it has a lot of autopsy scenes. The protagonist is the medical examiner. So I did a lot of research into autopsies and went to go watch an autopsy. So those things I drew on, but in my regular life, no, I try to keep the two separated.
That's cool. Definitely. I personally have plenty of questions about going and witnessing an autopsy, so you may have to ask those later. Shanora, how about for you, especially since this is your first thriller, but you've written previously. So what, do you ever draw from real people or real experiences?
Oh, for thrillers, I would say, I have a huge family and they have some crazy stories, but I would say most of it comes from imagination or like articles that I read that I come across. I actually have this one book that I'm working on that I got the inspiration because I saw a house and I was just like, I want to put characters in there. And so now I'm like building around this house that I saw, and it's just purely imagination for me most times. But I do like very intensive research. Mm-hmm. Which kind of like sucks the joy out of it sometimes, but I like to have more realistic aspects in my thrillers. So yeah, I pull more from imagination, but there are usually real life experiences involved if it's someone I know, like a story that they've told me. My family is crazy. I have a pretty huge family and they just tell I'm like, that did not happen. They're like, yeah, it did. I'm like, okay, I'm going to use that one day.
Yeah, always good to keep the family stories tucked away in the back of your head.
Yeah.
And then Lisa, how about for you? Ever pulled from the real world?
Yes, mainly imagination, but ticked by something, and never real people. I don't even do the pictures of somebody and create the character around a picture or anything. But the time I remember that was the most clear is I was going to write another book, and I'm driving on a beautiful day, and I come to a stoplight, and the radio's on, and there's an advertisement for a school for troubled teens. And so it's the mom and the dad and the radio saying, we don't know what to do. Our child is taken up with the wrong crowd and they're getting into trouble. And then this cool announcer says, well, have you tried to send them to such and such academy down somewhere, and they will take your child and get them whole again. And I thought, what would it take for me to send my kid down to a strange place? And what if that strange place wasn't so good? Anyway, I'm so going through it that I hear, me, and the light has changed. I haven't even noticed that I'm so far into this. So I do a quick U-turn and drive home and call my editor and say, I changed my idea. I want to set the story. So, and that was Without Mercy. And I had so much fun with that book. But it was just twigged by something I heard on the radio, an advertisement that I usually push the button to listen to a different station. In that case, it worked out.
Yes, I heard the tail end of that story, and I could see how that would work its way into a plot somewhere.
Yeah. I wish it happened more often. I guess I got to drive around and listen to the radio or something.
You gotta listen to commercials, Lisa.
Yeah, just commercials.
Yes. I think the commercials are where it's at. That's where the fun happens.
Yeah, right.
All right, let's see. We've got a couple of reader questions. So I'm just scrolling through them real quick to see which one we want to chat about next. I do love this one. So what are you currently reading? You know, we always talk about how, you know, I think most of us assume that authors all day long sit around writing and reading. Of course, we know that's not true. You guys lead very busy lives. But when you do have a chance to read, you know, are you currently reading anything that you're excited about? Or, you know, are there genres that you like to gravitate towards when you are reading for fun? And I'm going to let Lisa kick this one off first.
Okay. I had to go check my little phone because I've been doing a lot of listening to books rather than reading. I'm reading The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave, I think. I can hardly read it. But it's very, very good. And I just recently have been reading John Hart, and he does like the Southern Gothic thriller. He did back-to-back Edgars. He won back-to-back or close to back-to-back Edgars. So I thought, I haven't ever heard of this guy. And I liked him, a little on the brutal side for me. But I tried to read in genre because I love genre. I love suspense. But I do read, like, if something is on the Times list or the bestseller list forever, then I try to pick it up because I want to know why is it, what is this buzz? So I've been reading a lot of books that have been recommended by my editor, a lot of British woman who has a previous husband and she's going to be the next Mrs. So-and-so. And anyway, mysteries and suspense stories, not too bloody.
Right.
Exactly.
Shanora, how about you? Are you reading anything currently, or do you have a specific genre that you like to gravitate towards?
I'm like pretty much like Lisa. I love thrillers, suspense, mysteries. But right now I'm reading The Fiancé by Kate White. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's pretty okay so far. I'm enjoying it. I read it at night whenever I get the chance before bed, but it's pretty good. I'm reading that one. And if I want something lighter, I try to go towards more like women's fiction, or contemporary fiction, any contemporary. But I'm more of like a suspense mystery person for sure. I like that heart racing feeling, like you got to keep flipping the pages when you read.
This is where I differ from probably all of you. Charlie, same question.
Probably different than you, Lauren. I love suspense and thrillers. Lisa, you and I have the same editor, so I think we're getting a lot of the same book recommendations from John.
Yeah.
But I just finished actually the fourth in the series of Jack Carr's James Reese series, which is like a Navy SEAL type of book, and I just love those books. I just finished the fourth, which I think was the best one. But yeah, every once in a while I'll take a break from suspense thrillers, but mostly that's all I read.
And Nancy, how about you?
Yeah, I pretty much read, when I'm writing, I'm pretty much reading suspense thrillers, mysteries, that kind of thing. I have a tendency to read one and then read like 4 or 5 if there are by that author. And then I might just temporarily burn out and come back to them. And that's kind of what happened to me. I'm reading Louise Penny, which is much more of a mystery. But I read a bunch of them, and then I put them aside for whatever reason a few years ago. And just recently I thought, oh, I kind of remember, what was that last one about? So I bought, on my Kindle, I bought a pack of 3 so that they're going to run together. And I've finished the first one, and I'm into the second, whatever. So, and then back to whoever. I read a lot of John Sanford and Michael Connelly and some of those.
Right.
What are you saying, Lisa?
I just listened to a John Sanford, all those Prey books. I got tired of Lucas Sanford, but anyway, they're very good. And so I thought, oh, Buried Prey, I guess I'll read that one. And I was listening to it, driving 200 miles. I thought, this seems somewhat familiar. Is he getting really overdone? I thought, no, you've listened to this book, but it was so good. I listened to the whole damn thing. It was so good. It was a good one. And so he's good.
His characters are, I really like them.
I do too.
I shouldn't be shocked that you guys all love to read suspense and thriller novels on your time off. I laugh because I have to really pace myself with thrillers and mysteries and suspense novels. I know I chatted with Nancy about it a little bit last week, and our book club definitely knows that I'm a huge scaredy cat, so I have to buffer these thrillers with something. But I'm assuming you guys do not have the same problem that I do of scaring myself while I read these books. But I do wonder if you've ever creeped yourself out or gotten a little, maybe not scared, but a little tense while writing an intense scene. And I'm going to let Nancy kick this one off because I asked a similar question last week. So I'll let her, start us off.
Tell my story of, I was doing this research on I think it was actually on conjoined twins, and I was reading in the past, and it was down in I call it the hole. There's no windows. It's dark. It's, basically, but I had turned on the TV, but I was so absorbed in this reading, and it was one of those televisions at the time, don't have that TV anymore, but it would take forever to turn on. And I kind of forgot that I had turned it on, and it was just quiet in there, and I was reading about this, and then all of a sudden it just popped on and blasted me, and I almost hit the ceiling on that one. I was like, oh, that scared me. It was the same kind of thing, like in a book. I was just reading. I was actually doing research, but it was intriguing, and kind of thought I was alone. And then the TV blasted me.
Yes, and same thing I said last week. I'll repeat. I would have hit the ceiling. Would have scared me half to death. Charlie, how about you? Have you ever, either scared yourself or gotten a little nervous while writing an intense scene?
Well, yeah, I think that the writers at the advantage that they know exactly what's coming next. But
True.
So in The Girl Who Was Taken, some of the creepiest scenes are written from the villain's point of view. So the reader's in the villain's mind, and the villain's a really bad guy who abducts women. So like sort of climbing into that mindset and trying to write like that. I don't know if I can really say creep myself out, but I can see how people were creeped out by me and saying, "Oh, that's pretty awful." I remember I was sort of inspired when I was writing those scenes. At the time, I was reading Thomas Harris's Silence of the Lambs, and I had seen the movie multiple times, but I had never read the book. So I don't know why I decided to read the book, but the book is so creepy. I remember, everyone's seen the movie. I hope you've read the book, but there's a part where they're in the basement with the villain has night vision goggles on. And I remember I had to get up in the middle of the night. Something was going on in the basement with the hot water heater. And I was like generally scared to go into my own basement because I was in the middle of reading this book. So that was sort of the influence of how I decided to try to write some scenes from the villain's point of view. So a little creepy, definitely climbing into that mindset.
I would imagine that would really kind of mess with you after a little bit. Definitely would need some wind down space from doing that.
And some wine, just in general.
And some wine, just in general, yeah. Lisa, how about you? You've written a lot of thrillers and mysteries, and I know you don't go too gory with things, but have you ever scared yourself?
Yeah, I had a couple of situations like Nancy talked about one time. Well, I've gotten some really creepy fan mail. One prison guy thought my real name was Jackson, and thought maybe I should go to the picnic in the family reunion.
Jackson reunion?
Yeah. I thought, oh yeah, let me make a potato salad. That sounds good. No, I have creeped myself out, and I do have to kind of wash my brain because I do go from, oftentimes I'm in the killer's point of view, and sometimes they're pretty grisly, especially they used to be. Once I became a grandma, I can't be quite as grisly for some reason, but the one time that I remember that flipped me out, I was alone doing research. And in the middle of it, I decided I need to buy some concert tickets. And the radio station that was promoting them is Kink FM. So I write Kink, and you can't believe where I went. And it was back in the early days. I ended up with the foot fetish house. And I couldn't get out. I had to turn the whole thing down, and I thought, this is just too creepy for me. And one time I did write a scene where I actually jumped. I think if you're writing a book, it's important for the author to feel the emotions of whichever character you're writing. Bad guy, good guy, kid, cat. You have to feel those emotions. And so if it's going to be scary or sexy or whatever, it should reach into your soul. So yeah.
I do love that multiple of these stories are things outside of the actual writing that has scared everyone.
Well, I think it's because of the mindset that you've got. You're in that creepo mode, like Charlie said. He was in that mode and then had to go in the basement. That's
right. Shanora, how about you?
Yeah, I actually had one because I was working on my second thriller for Defina, and it was one scene where the woman, it's about a husband and a wife, but she discovers that, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say much about it because they haven't announced it. But anyway, there's a scene where she's afraid, she's scared, and she's afraid of her husband, and she's like in the middle of nowhere. And she, after reading a part of a journal, something that she discovers about him, he, pops up out of nowhere in the dark while she's about to go outside. And it just kind of like jolted me a little bit because he's just there. And I'm like imagining myself as this character, and I'm like, and he's like this big guy, described as this, pretty big buff, guy. And he's just like there in the dark, and like they're in this huge mansion. And then she turns around and he's like, boom, right there. And I'm like, okay, this is scary. I had to like pause and like walk out the room because I was like, okay, let me take a moment. This is not real. Okay. Not real. And it was really late here. I was working at night and everyone was asleep. and that didn't help. So I just kind of paused and then came back to it. I drank some juice. Okay, it's okay.
Probably my biggest fear is something suddenly there. So I can imagine how that would happen. Well, what I find really fascinating is that each of you have talked about how you have to put yourself in that point of view of your antagonist and how you have to really approach your story from that flip side. You know, I think a lot of us, when we read these books, we're so used to empathizing and, you know, really connecting with the protagonist. You know, that's who we're envisioning, that's who we're partnering ourselves to on this journey. But, you know, for writing, you've got to put yourself in those shoes that no one really wants to ever be in. How do you go about humanizing that type of character? You know, humanizing a protagonist who's doing things that, you know, you would obviously never do yourself or would never imagine doing. You know, how do you approach that and like really make it something believable? Charlie, I'm going to let you start this one off because you're kind of the first one that talked about the point of view of your antagonist and being in those dark places.
You know, I love Lisa's description that, you know, if you want and by the way, Lisa, I'm going to steal this on every other interview I do, but you want the reader to feel these emotions, you know, the writer has to feel them. And otherwise it's just generic. And so, you know, it is funny. I don't even know that writers are necessarily aware of it, subconsciously for sure. But in order to write from a character's point of view, you have to become that character. So if you're going to write from a villain's point of view, even though it's never anything you're going to do personally, you have to get into that mindset. You know, someone told me a long time ago that you don't write a book thinking about how the people you know are going to respond. I mean, my most current book that comes out, that I just finished, that comes out next year, has some like wild, perverse sex in it. If I thought about my mother-in-law every time I was writing that, the scenes would have been cut. I mean, you can't think about what other people are going to think of you as a writer. You have to buy into the character, and you have to only see the character through, you know, their point of view and how you want the reader to see them. And I think that helps any writer get through it.
And then Lisa, why don't you go next, since, you know, obviously Charlie took some of your writing advice.
No, that's exactly right. I think Stephen King is a master at that. You know, I think it's very difficult to write the opposite sex and come off real. I think it's very difficult. I think it's difficult for men to be women and women to be men and come off not as the woman would want the man to be or the man would expect the woman to be. But I think, like Nancy said, John Sanford is good. Stephen King is a master at it. And I think you have to just put yourself in there. And not everybody can do it. It's a trick. It's part of it. But it's like, I think if you watch a movie and the actor becomes the person, the character, it's the same sort of thing. You have to be that person. And no, you wouldn't do those things in your normal life, but in your wicked life. Mm-hmm. And I believe, you know, I'm a really good person, but I can go dark. I would never act on it, but I can certainly go dark, or I can go frivolous, and I'm not a frivolous person. It's just part of the deal. It's part of the job, part of the writing process, at least for me. May not be for everybody. And I always say that no matter what the question is, it's how should I write this? How should I do this? What do I need to have an outline? Do I need to know the ending? I sat next to a woman, it was one of the Lisas, you know, they confuse us all. And she says, I just start, once I have the first line, I know the rest of the book.
Wow.
And it takes me a long time to get the first line. That is not the way it is for me, but it works. That works for her. So I can't even presume to say how everybody should do it. I can only say what I do. That's what I
Right.
do. I just go dark.
Well, that's a good way to look at it too.
You have to get out of that dark spot. Those character actors that stay in character.
Mhm.
The method actors.
Yeah, the method actor. I'm a grandma. I can't do that.
Yeah, as I say, I definitely, if any of my bosses are watching, I'm not encouraging any of these authors to go method with what they're doing. Nancy, how about you?
Um, when I think about the antagonist, also, the what is it that makes them tick? And I think about like a small moment that in their life, and then the rest of us would get over it, as we talked about grudges earlier, whatever. But it just magnify it and make it bigger and bigger and bigger until they finally act on it. And that's kind of what I was thinking in writing The Gossip. But the book that I remember that I really felt that did that was, I don't know, you remember The House of Sand and Fog? That book about 10 years ago? I don't know. And it was about this house. And it just became like this incident happened and it fell on this and she didn't pay her and whatever. And then it went into foreclosure and then it got into this whole battle with the people that bought the house. And it just went on and on and on. It was really a good book. But it was like a really small thing that started this snowball. And I kind of think of that with the antagonist. I think there's something that's bugged him or her for however long, and then they finally just lose it and decide, I'm going to act on this. I want my revenge. And I think when you're working on being that person, if you stick with whatever it is that really bothers them, I think you can stay there in their head and understand them more.
Right, definitely. Shanora, how about you? How do you approach those dark scenes?
Dark scenes. Yeah, you definitely, like Lisa said, have to tap into it. I think it's something that you have to imagine yourself as that character. But I think with the antagonist, you have to figure out why they're so upset to the point that they want revenge or why they're doing certain ththings. And I actually write in another genre. I wrote like romance for my thrillers, but I had a dark romance series and it was a 3-book trilogy. Well, trilogy is 3 books, but it was 3 books, and the guy was this really mean mafia man, but he's my most beloved character from my romance readers. And I'm like, why? And I realized it was because I humanized him. I made people feel empathy for his childhood and the way he grew up or a certain thing that happened to him. And I think that is how you have to approach it. Once you tap into it, it's like, we're going to get these readers to understand why this person is doing what they're doing, and to not really sympathize, but to understand, like, okay, I get where they're coming from in a sense.
Right. That definitely, I like that, again, we've got such a range of different viewpoints on how to approach it. But at the end of the day, it's really understanding what caused someone to become that type of person or to resort to those actions. I think it's really incredible that you're all able to put yourself in that mindset. I think that would definitely be one of the trickier things about writing a mystery or a thriller novel. We have just a couple minutes left to our hour, so I've got one last question for everyone. Maybe a little bit of a tricky one, so if we need to take a pause, we can. But there are a number of people in our book club who are either aspiring writers or who are interested in writing. And since we do have such an array of veteran writers here, from doing it for decades to being newer to the genre and everything in between, what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger writer self, or you would give yourself when you were just starting to write? What would you want to say to yourself at this point of your career and in your process? And I'm going to let Lisa take this one first. As what would you want to tell yourself if you could?
That's a difficult question.
It is.
For me, it's a difficult question because not only was I in such a different place in my life than I am now, I wish in life I'd spent more time with my parents who got ill and I lost them, and with my my children, because they were so young. We were so desperate that I had this chance to write. And I don't think I would change that because we were really desperate. But I think if it were for me, as for writing, I would say, just in general, not with throwing your personal life, I would say, trust your gut. If you like something, trust your gut. Listen to other people, but trust your gut.
I like that. I like the idea of listening to others, but trusting yourself. That's really smart. Nancy, how about you? What would you tell your younger writing self?
I would, as far as writing goes, I would tell myself to spend more time on the characters. I think it's something that's developed over the years. I was very heavy on plot when I was younger. And I'm not to say that I'm not still, but it's the characters that people remember. It's the characters that drive the story. If you don't, if they're too, middle of the road, it's not going to generate those emotions of whatever, fear, love, anger. You get to know those characters. And I remember when I was very new at writing, there was a gal, I can't remember what her name was. We had gone to New York to this conference. She was another writer, and she was talking about one of her characters, and she said, they would, whatever their names were, Mike and Allie or something like that, they would hate being in New York. And I remember thinking, that's a weird thing to say about your characters. Like, it was like, I was just too, but she was being funny and she was right. It was kind of like, know who they are, they were thrown into another place. And that is truly something I would tell new writers, whatever. Pay attention to that more than I did.
And Charlie, how about you? What would you want to tell yourself when you were just starting out?
Well, I'm sort of dealing with this with a friend right now who's trying to write his first manuscript. And I put a challenge out to him to write a certain amount of pages by Labor Day. And so I just got a text from him the other day, and he said, do you ever feel like you're boring yourself with your story? And, I think aspiring writers have like a different perception of what really happens when published authors write a book. My answer to him was, I bore myself all the time. The key, though, is you have to write the pages. You have to write the words first in order to then go back and get rid of all the boring stuff. So my advice when I was struggling to figure out how to write a book, and I would go weeks without writing anything, my advice to aspiring writers is just write the pages, write the words, write anything until you get to a certain mark, 50 pages, 100 pages. Then you can go back and try to make it good or better or perfect. But when you sit down and you're trying to write it perfect the first time, you'll get stuck forever. So my advice is just write something every day, and then you can go back and make that something better later.
Right. Just right. That sounds like such simple advice, but I feel like would also be the scariest advice to get. It would be the hardest to follow for me personally. And Shanora, how about you? What would you want to tell yourself if you could?
Well, I still feel like a younger author, but all of y'all have said things that actually have resonated with me because, like Lisa mentioned, the family, the kids. My kids are very young, and I try to find balance in that. And I'm also not desperate, but I am it's a transition for me. So everything's new. Right. And that touches on that. It's something that I actually have been paying close attention to and how much time I've sacrificed in writing. rather than spending time with my family. Even though you know this is for them in the future, it's also like, you know, in that present moment, you just want it to be a little bit better. And what Charlie just said actually about just writing, that's important to me, because I used to just like, if I couldn't find the words, I would just like, well, I'm not writing today. Like I was super stubborn. Like I'm not writing, forget it, whatever. And I realized like, you know, those boring parts can be cut out. You know, maybe just, you know, getting the words out will get you to flow for the next chapter or the next one or the next one. And I just learned that. And I actually had a Instagram live earlier, and I said that same thing. Someone asked me, how would you help an aspiring author? And I was like, or what advice would you give? And I was like, well, just to keep writing, and go back and make the tweaks that you want to make. And I believe that is what I would tell my younger self. Like, don't be stubborn, just write the words. If you really want to do this, go do it. Like, stop playing, go do it.
Yeah. I think a little bit of stubbornness is a good thing, but also understanding where your stubbornness lies is also important. Well, I want to say a huge thank you to all four of you for joining us for this hour. I know I speak for the entire book club when I say that we've really enjoyed not only getting to know you guys, but also learning a little bit more about your craft and how you approach your work. And this has been a really fun and interesting hour, and just further proves that I was never meant to be a thriller, mystery, suspense author. So good thing I'm not going to try that ever in my life, because I'll scare myself all day long. But I just want to say a big thank you, and we all really appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening.
Thanks, Lauren.
It was fun.
Thank you.
And so thank you to all of our readers. We will be announcing our flash giveaway winners in the comment section later this evening. And to anyone who just tuned in and missed the start of our hour, don't worry. We will be posting the full thing later on this weekend, so you can watch our full conversation. And if you have any further questions about mystery thrillers or questions for our authors, feel free to drop them down in the comment section. Myself and our other book club admins will be watching that for the next few days, and we will try to get you on any answers that we can. So for now, I'm losing my voice. So have a great evening to everyone watching.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks.